Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down the Friday night slate for Week 4 College Football DFS for the 2024 season. So this is Friday, September 27th. We've got a nice little two-game slate. We've got one showdown in the ACC and one in the Big Ten. We got teams from both coasts in action. We've got some pretty solid options in DFS, a lot of options for creating the lineups here on this slate. So we're going to break down both these games, tell you what you can expect from each game, and how you should be constructing your lineups for this Friday night slate if you want to win some money playing DFS. Now, before we continue, I do want to mention our video for the Saturday main slate is already out. DraftKings made a huge 13-game main slate this week. We broke down all 13 games. Check out the channel feed or check out the podcast feed if you were interested in that, if you have not seen it already, because it's a really good slate, and I highly suggest you check it out. We're also going to have our video for the Saturday night slate coming out later this week, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel. That way you can watch that as well, and you can be with us for the rest of the college football season. We will be bringing you all the info, all the picks, all the previews for all of the college football DFS slates, well, at least as many as I can do until the end of the season. All right, let's go ahead and end the introduction there. We got two good games to get to, y'all, so let's go ahead. All right, game number one is going to be a battle in the ACC that used to be a battle in the Big East back in the 90s and early 2000s. Virginia Tech heading to Coral Gables to take on the Miami Hurricanes. Miami is currently 19.5-point favorites. This game has a total of 54.5 points, thanks to our friends at ESPN Bet for the lines. And that means that this game is projected to be about 37-17 in favor of the Hurricanes. And this makes Miami the highest team total on the slate. This game has the highest total on the slate between the two games. Virginia Tech also with the lowest team total on the two slate because the spread is so wide between these two teams, right? So let's go ahead and kick things off with the Hokies. So Trey Drone is their quarterback. He's priced $8,000, which based off of preseason expectations for him seems pretty reasonable. You know, he came into the season, he was a returning starter. He's a dual threat, ton of rushing upside, but he hasn't really had a ton of production so far this season, right? You know, when we play DFS, we want at least 3 times value for their salary, right? So Trey Drone at a salary of $8,000, we want at least 24 fantasy points out of him. Well, he has one game this season where he's got exactly 24 points, another game this season where he's got 30. So really he's been good 2 out of 4 games, but one of those good games wasn't a great game. So he's really only had one great game out of 4 games. You know, he does have a ton of rushing upside. He is going to be asked to do it a lot in this game because I do anticipate that his team is going to be trailing, but he's also not been as effective running this year as last year. You know, he's only had one game where he really kind of took off as a runner. That was against Old Dominion. Competition here this week is a little bit better than Old Dominion. So, you know, on a 2-game slate, I'm going to be playing him. I'm definitely going to be playing him in game stacks of this game, but I don't exactly feel good about it. I would still rank him second out of all 4 quarterbacks here on this slate, with all that being said. At the running back spot, Virginia Tech does have a workhorse running back in Basil Tuen, and he has been just solid so far this season. Over 23 fantasy points in every single game. Seen a solid workload in every single game. Scored a touchdown in every single game. Just can't say enough about how steady he has been for this team. I do not think that Miami is a great matchup for running backs. You know, I watched that game against South Florida, or a lot of that game against South Florida. They were really kind of had more through the air. Byron Brown, South Florida's quarterback, did have 21 fantasy points in that game. They didn't really do a whole lot on the ground at all. Really nobody has against Miami so far this season, but they haven't played a team of Virginia Tech's caliber. I think it's a pretty solid chance that Tuen gets going, and I think that with this Virginia Tech side, I'm probably going to want to play either Drones or Tuen in every single lineup. I don't see this Virginia Tech team getting shut out. I see one of their games having a lot of success, and I think it's more likely to be Tuen. Now, in 2-game slates, playing a backup running back can win you money. We've seen that numerous times so far this season. Malachi Thomas is the backup running back for Virginia Tech. I don't have a strong feeling that this guy is going to be the backup that wins you a whole lot of money. He only had 2 carries against Rutgers, only mustered 2 yards. The thing is, though, is that he's an injury away from being a workhorse running back. Like if Basil Tuen were to leave this game in the first quarter and all of a sudden it's Malachi Thomas for 3.5 quarters, he would be a great value. But I don't like banking on an injury. But like I said, RB2s can win you some money in 2-game slates. So I did want to mention his name, did want to get him out there. But Tuen is very clearly the workhorse running back in this backfield. The wide receiver spot is where things get dicey for Virginia Tech. Jaylen Lane has kind of been their lead guy so far this season. You know, leads in interceptions, yards, and total targets. Last week he had 6 targets against Rutgers, only hauled in 2 of them for 38 yards. Not a particularly great game log, and it's because of Drones hasn't had a whole lot of success as a passer, but that's not super surprising because that's what he does, right? He's a mobile quarterback. But B, they've just been spreading the ball around, spreading the snaps around so much. And really, I prefer to not pay up for Lane when his target share isn't that significantly higher than all of the other guys that are playing. In recent games, both the Gosnell brothers, Benji and Steven, have been factors. Daquan Felton has been a factor as well. He's honestly been a little bit of a disappointment this season considering how strong he ended last year. But both Felton and the Gosnell brothers have been playing a ton. And so if you're looking for a cheap stacking partner, I would kind of lean on those guys. But I got to say, my favorite stacking partner for Kyron Drones would be Allie Jennings. Allie Jennings was an ODU transfer. He was really, really good at ODU. His really struggled with injuries his time at Virginia Tech, but when he's healthy, he's been productive. This slate, he is only $3,600. I would expect him to be this team's target leader and wide receiver 1 if he's active, and I would expect him to be active for this game. $3,600 is a very reasonable price tag, and I'm willing to take shots on Allie Jennings in a GPP with or without Kyron Drones as a stacking partner. Now, on the Miami side, I mean, can we talk enough about Cam Ward? He has been just outstanding to start the season. Like, really, any superlative you have for Cam Ward this season, he's been the man this season. He's at over 30 fantasy points in every single game. He's thrown for over 3 touchdowns in every single game. He's thrown for over 300 yards in every single game, just consistently producing. Now, here's the deal, though. He hadn't faced a defense as good as Virginia Tech's, but I'm not sure that it's going to matter. He is my overall top quarterback play on this slate. I think it's highly likely that he gets back to 30 fantasy points because even if this game turns into a shootout, even if it turns into a game where Miami struggles a little bit offensively, that just means that there's going to be more passing volume for Cam Ward, and the more throws he gets, the more opportunities he's going to have to put up fantasy points. He is my number 1 quarterback play on this entire slate, and I got to say, because of how expensive he is and because of how expensive the top running backs are on this slate, I think this is a 2-game slate where it is entirely viable to play a 1 quarterback build. I'm not normally an advocate of that. I normally think when you have the super flex position on DraftKings and FanDuel, you play a quarterback in that position. But this week, this slate, with the cost associated with Ward, with the cost associated with the top running backs, and really the uneasiness of the other quarterbacks, I think you can play a 1 quarterback lineup with Ward, and I'm certainly going to be rolling out a few of those. At the running back spot, Miami has Damian Martinez. Look, he is just a touchdown or bust play. Like, you look at his game logs, he's had 2 good games. It's no coincidence. Those are 2 games where he scored touchdowns. I mean, that's just how I see it. What you need for Martinez to be good is you need him to vulture touchdowns from the 1-yard line, which is really what he did against South Florida. So I'm not super interested, but if you're going to fade Cam Ward, it would be wise to play Damian Martinez because, look, I don't think this Miami team gets shut out. So, like, if Cam Ward's not going to be scoring the touchdowns, Martinez is probably going to be vulturing them. So I think he's worth a look at $5,700, but it's not a guy I'm going to be playing a lot of. Now, Mark Fletcher has been active for this backfield. I think in a closer game, I don't really know how it's going to break down, but Mark Fletcher and A.J. Allen have been seeing carries in every single game as backup running backs. And then you have Jordan Lyle, who has been the garbage time king so far this season. He scored touchdowns in 3 straight games. All of them have been in garbage time. He hit 100 yards against UCF thanks to a 91-yard touchdown run. Look, this guy is explosive, and if this game turns into a blowout, he's the type of guy that can break off a long touchdown run and instantly pay off his salary in 1 single play. So I think in GPPs, I'm willing to take shots as a salary saver at Jordan Lyle. But again, it would be with the caveat that I'm expecting this game to be a blowout because that's the only way he's going to end up getting in. At the receiver position for Miami, they kind of have 1 constant and then a whole lot of variables, and that constant is Xavier Restrepo. He is the volume king in this Miami offense. 8 targets against South Florida. He just has the most consistent volume, the highest floor, and the highest ceiling because of that volume. And so I certainly think he's the best wide receiver play on the slate. I think you can play him with or without Cam Ward, but I think maximum effectiveness would be to stack those 2 guys together just because so much of their volume is tied to each other. After him, though, you have just a rotating cast of characters. It could be any one of 4 guys that ends up going off on any given game. And it was Isaiah Horton that did so against South Florida. He had 9 targets in that game, caught 8 of them for over 100 yards, ended up with 27.8 fantasy points. If you're one that tends to ride the hot hand, he would be the hot hand right now. Sam Brown Jr. also had a decent game against South Florida, caught a 76-yard bomb, which really kind of salvaged his fantasy game, and 15.5 fantasy points, pretty much all of which were on that one play. He's not a bad option either. Jacoby George ended up kind of being the odd man out against South Florida. Only 1 catch, only 2 fantasy points, but he was 1 game removed from having 8 targets for over 100 yards against Ball State. So I really think that long term it goes Restrepo, George, Brown, Horton, and it just so happened that last game it ended up being Horton, Restrepo, Brown, George. Right, like the order can vary. If you're playing a lot of lineups, I think it would be very wise to stack exactly 2 of these wide receivers with Cam Ward. I think you can play single stacks as well. If I'm playing a single stack, it's more likely to be Restrepo than anybody else. But I think that you can go Restrepo, George, Restrepo, Horton, Restrepo, Brown. You can get all the combinations without a whole lot of opportunity cost. And oh, by the way, don't forget about Elijah Arroyo, the tight end. If he scores a touchdown, he's going to instantly pay off his price tag, and he's shown the capability of doing that. He's only $3,300 here on this Friday night slate. All right, that's going to do it for game number 1. Let's take a quick breather and then move on to game number 2. Now, I do want to mention there are places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I tend to record these pretty early. Like this is for a Friday slate. I'm recording it Wednesday night. I record the Saturday episode on Tuesday. So, if there's ever any like opinion changes or injuries that, kind of impact things, I do try to tweet it out and get it out there. I'm also more than happy to answer any lineup questions, start sit questions as we get closer to lock. Just reach out to me on Twitter. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description on audio as well as on YouTube. Fantasy Corner Discord is a lot of really good people who talk DFS for a lot of different sports. If you're looking for people to talk, strategy with, talk lineups with, it's a place to go. If you're looking for people to just sweat it out with and have fun watching the games with, it's a great place to go as well. Cannot recommend it enough if you're looking for a DFS community to be a part of. Also, I do write an article for every college football slate to my Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. I basically profile my core plays for every single slate. I can't guarantee that you're going to win money every single slate. It's not that easy, but I can guarantee that you're going to get well-researched, well-thought-out takes that take into account X's and O's and ownership and DFS strategy, and it can help improve your process and get better at college football DFS. All right, so that is going to do it for the slate promo there. Let's go ahead and move on to game number 2 with a bi-coastal battle in the Big Ten. Yeah, this is the first of the matchups in the Big Ten, in my opinion. You've got Washington traveling from the Pacific Northwest all the way to Piscataway, New Jersey to play an 8 p.m. game on a Friday. It's just interesting scheduling, but I guess we're going to have to get used to this in the Big Ten, right? So Rutgers is 2.5-point favorites in this game with a total of 44.5 points. That is significantly lower than Virginia Tech Miami. It's 10 points lower. The implied team totals are 23-21 in favor of Rutgers, making them the second and third highest team totals on the slate. But this game environment leaves a lot to be desired from the first one. The first game is certainly a lot more likely to turn into a shootout. I think this game is much more likely to turn into a snooze fest, just when you look at the profile of these two teams. But anyway, let's go ahead and talk about it. On the Washington side, Will Rogers is their quarterback, and he's played fairly well in terms of like real life quarterback production. Like he's been over 70% of his passes every single week, thrown a touchdown every single week, has not thrown an interception. That's pretty good real life play, but it has not turned into a lot of fantasy success. He just doesn't really throw the ball downfield enough to accumulate a whole lot of fantasy points quickly. He also is a non-rusher. He has negative rushing yards on the season. So to me, he's a guy that has more of a floor than a ceiling. And if I'm playing somebody at the quarterback position that cost me $7,400, I want a higher ceiling, right? And I do think that Rutgers is going to be the best defense that he's played as well. So I just don't really know how this shakes out. I still rank him as my third favorite quarterback on the slate. But like I said, y'all, really every quarterback after Cam Ward has their question marks, has their doubts. And I really think that I'm going to be building a lot of one quarterback lineups with Cam Ward, and I think the field is going to be doing so as well. The most popular player on the Washington side is going to be running back Jonah Coleman. So Jonah Coleman is their clear running back one. His carries are not being stolen by anybody else. And they've played all different types of game flows so far this season. He's been successful in all of them. So I think he's just a really solid, steady play at the running back position. I would say when you look at the slate as a whole, he might be, well, I don't want to say that. I think that would be a little rash. He's certainly one of the top 3 running back plays on the slate, and I think I can make you an argument that he's the number 1 running back play on the slate. He has less concerns about his workload, less concerns about his offense than the 2 running backs priced ahead of him, but he still hasn't been as productive as either of those 2 guys at this point in the season. At the wide receiver spot, Denzel Boston is starting to turn into this team's wide receiver 1. That was the guy that I was drafting in best ball this offseason in this offense. I thought it was going to eventually be Denzel Boston's role, and it's kind of turning into that. He has 15 catches in back-to-back weeks. He has now led in targets in back-to-back weeks for this Washington team. I think he's turning into this team's wide receiver 1. He has been in double-digit fantasy points every game this season. He is very clearly the top receiving option on this slate of anybody not named Restrepo. The other Washington receivers are pretty solid, though. I'm not just totally discounting them. Giles Jackson was second in targets with 6 in week 2. And this comes after having 3 straight games of 6 or more catches. So I don't think he's a poor option at all. Jeremiah Hunter kind of feels like the odd man left out, though. He only had 5 targets in their most recent game. He is all the way down at $4,000, though. That's very affordable. And, I say this about DFS all the time. Long-term listeners of the show know exactly what's coming. But sometimes a bad play turns into a good play when nobody plays him and that guy goes off. And there's enough variance in this Washington passing game that Jeremiah Hunter at $4,000, very cheap. I don't think a whole lot of people are going to play him. I think he's the type of bad play that could turn into a good play. Nothing in the numbers suggests that he's going to out-target Boston or Jackson in this game, but $4,000, not a lot of ownership. I could see it happening. On the Rutgers side, they have been traditionally a very, what's the right word to use here? Constipated? No. Struggling? No, I think that's a little too harsh. Mediocre offense. Yeah, mediocre feels like the right word. They've been a very mediocre offense in the last few seasons in college football. And when they got Minnesota transfer Ethan Kaliak-Manis at quarterback, I thought that trend was going to continue, and it kind of has. They did beat Virginia Tech last Saturday, so props to them. But Kaliak-Manis is another one of these quarterbacks. He's like the worst version of Will Rogers, where he has played good real-life quarterback, but it hasn't turned into a whole lot of fantasy success. And so he is the cheapest of the 4 quarterbacks. I would power rank him as the 4th best of these 4 quarterbacks. I think if you're playing him, the hope would be that Drones and Rogers fail and that he puts up like 18 to 20 fantasy points, because I think that's probably his ceiling here in this game. I don't think he's a terrible play, but I think he's far from a good play. At the running back spot, you've got probably the most questionable running back situation among these 4 teams. Kyle Monangai is the lead running back. There's no question about that. He's had 27 and 26 carries in his last 2 games. Really tough sledding against Virginia Tech. Did not do a whole lot. I only averaged 3.2 yards per carry, but he still got in the end zone, still got 84 yards, still ended up with 14 fantasy points. And because of how much this team runs him, he certainly does have a ton of upside. But also they have another back that they run a lot as well, Samuel Brown the 5th. Not to be confused with Samuel Brown the 2nd on Miami. This one's 3 full Samuel Browns ahead of him. Samuel Brown the 5th of Rutgers, 14 carries against Virginia Tech. So between their 2 lead running backs, they combined for 40 carries in that game. This team loves to run the football. And really, I think that Brown is certainly the most competent RB2 on this entire slate. And I don't think that it is – let me think the best way to phrase this. There's a non-zero chance that Brown ends the game with more fantasy points than Monangai. And so of all the RB2s on this slate, he is the one I think you have to consider the most, even though Monangai is probably the overall top running back on the slate. Now, at the wide receiver spot, this is where everybody is going to go for their salary savers this week because they're just so obvious and they're so easy. Demir Miller is an FCS transfer who came in, and nobody really thought he was going to be Rutgers' number 1 wide receiver, but he has been that through 3 games so far this season. He had another solid game against Virginia Tech, 8 targets in that game, 5 catches for 98 yards. He only has 1 touchdown on the season. If he had a few more touchdowns, his fantasy numbers would be really good. He's only $4,000. He is going to be the favorite value play of everybody here on this slate. So if you're looking to get a little bit of leverage, who can you play instead of Demir Miller, or even who could you double stack this Rutgers passing game with? Well, the wide receiver 2 appears to be Kenny Fletcher, who actually led the team with 9 targets against Virginia Tech, caught 7 of them for 61 yards, has 2 touchdowns on the season. So like Miller, he's a guy that is very cheap, only $3,500 on DraftKings, could very well be the value play that you need to make your lineup work. But like I said, I think a lot of people are going to play Miller. So I think Fletcher gives you a ton of leverage that if Fletcher outperforms Miller, not only do you get the $500 in savings, but you get the kind of the leverage boost from that as well. And don't count out Ian Strong. He's kind of been the 3rd option in this receiving core. Has not scored a touchdown yet this season, really used minimally in their first 2 blowout wins, but got a lot of shine against Virginia Tech. 5 targets, 4 catches, 110 yards for 18 fantasy points. He's certainly in consideration at 3,400 as well. I'm really not considering anybody past those guys, though. Dremel was a guy that started for them last season, but he's playing in games but not getting targeted. So I don't really know what that's all about. I think I would personally keep my players for this, even in the biggest of GPPs, the most, the most grimy you make your lineup. I'm still probably only considering Miller, Fletcher, and Strong. I would rank them in that order. I think ownership will play out in that order as well. So again, Miller's a great play, but if you're looking for leverage, Fletcher and Strong could provide that, or could provide a stacking option if you want to really go off the board and go Kaliak-Manis and play with 2 of those Rutgers wide receivers. All right, but that's going to do it for this episode, y'all. Hopefully we gave you guys all the information that you need in order to build some successful lineups here for this Friday night slate. If this video helped you out in any way, please hit the like button on YouTube. Please rate and review the audio. I cannot stress enough how much those help me out, and I really do appreciate it when you guys do that. I really didn't know until I started creating content just how important those are. They help me out a ton. Helps the podcast show up in searches, helps the videos get noticed, helps them pop up on the algorithm. YouTube only finds value in my videos if people are liking and commenting them. So please keep doing that, and I really do appreciate it. Go check out our Saturday main slate video if you have not already. Saturday night slate video dropping tomorrow night. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel so that way you can be here for that. And remember, if you want more from me, follow me on Twitter, join the Fantasy Corner Discord, or get access to the articles on the Patreon. But that's going to do it for this Friday night slate, y'all. Best of luck to you guys on this Friday night slate. Go check out the Saturday video. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you guys next time.